Hi folks, I'm Phil Medcalf from Alpha Marine Photography, and in this video I'm going to take a look at the Backscatter Mini Flash 2 strobe. This is an interesting strobe in the fact that its predecessor was sort of the first in my sort of knowledge that was created specifically for macro underwater photography. Most other strobes up until then were being sold as sort of general purpose strobes. Even the quite small ones were still had the capability of using them, especially if you use them in pairs, to do wide angle photography. And I still sort of do a lot of my wide angle photography with a couple of quite small Inon S2000 strobes. You can do it. The original, the Mini Flash, was very much aimed at people who just wanted to do macro photography, or people who had a bit more money, who maybe had some quite powerful strobes for their sort of their wide angle photography, and wanted something considerably a bit more compact and more sort of aimed at doing macro. Criticism of quite a few large strobes is that their sort of minimum powers aren't as low as some people would like for doing very close-up stuff, and that their beams are very wide, so it's hard to confine them without having to get a snoot. Now, that said, one of the big selling points of the Backscatter Mini Flash and Mini Flash 2 is that you can buy a snoot to go with it that works quite well. We'll dig into that shortly. So we'll talk a little bit about the basic sort of specs of the strobe. It's quite a small strobe, but it is fairly long. So it's about 20 centimeters long. A lot of it, that portion, is the battery compartment. So they've kind of made it fairly sort of narrow by kind of putting the battery compartment out behind it. It's not the light. I don't think it's the lightest strobe around. It uses a lithium battery, and it's made from aluminium. Most of it is aluminium, so it's going to be a bit heavier than, say, a small plastic one with AAA batteries in, AA batteries in. Sorry, particularly when you get it underwater, it's dense, so it's about 150 grams negative. Compare that to Inon's S220 strobe that I talked about in a previous video, which was only 50 grams negative, so a fair difference. It's quite negative. As a strobe, it's got a guide number of 16, so it's not a high powered strobe, but it's aimed at macro. It's aimed at using at quite short distances, so you don't need massive output for it. It's a bit of a waste of time. It has quite a narrow beam. I think it's something like 80-degree beam. Don't quote me on that. I may be wrong, but I couldn't actually find it in any of the specs that I've pulled up and things. It does, one of the things that sort of sets it apart, let me just get the diffuser off, is it has an LED, well, two LED lights that together act as a sort of almost a video light, certainly a powerful aiming light. The original Mini Flash apparently had something like a 500 lumen light in it, and what users found, and certainly I had a go with one, and I thought it was an issue, was if you were trying to use it to aim while using a snoot, it wasn't bright enough for the brightest sort of shallow water conditions that you might want to use a snoot in. You struggled to see the light, so they upped the power of the light. It uses a bigger battery than the original one, and that's really helped. Burn time, if you're just using the light on its own at full power, they say it's about 90 minutes. I can believe that. The flash, they say you'll get 2,000 flashes out of it. Now, nowhere did I find anything that said 2,000 full power flashes. So that could be 2,000 flashes at the lowest output setting. Don't know. If if Backscatter are watching, or if anyone has specific test results to confirm or deny it, please feel free to let me know. Put a comment below or drop me an email, whatever you want to do. I'm only going off the information that I am provided. So the strobe comes with a clip-on diffuser that's going to soften and spread the beam a bit. I tend to only use strobes with the diffuser. You'll have heard me say this before if you've watched any of my other videos. It comes with a ball mount. It also includes a YS mount. Important thing for everybody outside of the United States is it comes with an Allen key, and the Allen key is not metric, so you need this Allen key, or you need a set of imperial Allen keys, which I have nothing, no underwater photography gear apart from this strobe that needs an imperial Allen key. So I normally do not take a set of imperial Allen keys with me. So yeah, if you take this ball mount off for, I don't know, to back it down and then go somewhere, make sure you bring the Allen key with you. Otherwise, you'll have to hope that someone else on your diving trip has one of these strobes and has the right Allen key. I did mean to sort of check and measure, work out what size it is, because I have, my toolbox at home is old enough that I have a set of imperial Allen keys in there, so I can sort of let you know which one it is in case you ever need to replace it. So yeah, there's a YS mount if you want to use flexi arms. If you know me, you'll know my views on flexi arms. I'm not a big fan, but it is there as an option. You also get a little gadget that we're going to talk about a bit further on. Now, one of the nice things with this set, what you don't get is batteries. So batteries are sold separately. I would say make sure that you get the batteries from a backscatter dealer who's going to give you the right batteries. I have had so many sort of bizarre problems with lithium batteries where it says they're the same generic number, and then they don't fit things. So I've reached the point now where it's like, just get the one, don't try and freestyle it and save yourself a couple of pounds. Get the ones that are recommended from the dealer. Much better idea. So yeah, the strobe itself you can buy on its own. In the UK, current UK price is £390 for the strobe. A set of batteries, a pair of batteries and a charger will set you back £72 for the recommended ones. You can also, and this is what I did and what I think most of my customers who've bought Backscatter Mini Flashes, either the original or this one from us, have done, is you can buy it as a set with a snoot. That's just over £500 to buy it as a set. And then if you want to buy the snoot on its own, it's £140 if you need a replacement. So it's like £30 cheaper to buy it as a set initially. So if you're thinking, I want to do snooting, it's the way to go. If you're not familiar with snooting is using a device on your flash or on your video light as well, to reduce the area of light. And this is how people produce these images, especially of images of creatures that are on some things. So you see it often with creatures on the sand where they're just lit up in a small area, and none of the sand or very little of the sand is lit up around it. That's usually done by snooting. It's a technique that can make some really nice striking pictures, and it's a technique that can be really quite infuriating. A lot of strobes, the snoots for them don't carry any light from the strobe spotting light if the strobe had one, or in a lot of cases strobes don't have a spotting light or an aiming light or whatever you want to call it. One of the big pluses with the Backscatter Mini Flash and now the Mini Flash 2 is that you have this video light built in that will, or aiming light built in that will light up where the snoot is going to work when you fire the flash. It's a big plus. It makes your life so much easier. Making the light more powerful than the original has definitely helped. And it's just nice to have being able to go, okay, this is the area that is going to be lit up. You get exactly the same area visible. So it definitely will increase your success rate. If you've ever done snooting with a conventional strobe with a snoot on that didn't have some aiming means, it takes a bit of practice, it takes a bit of skill. A lot of it is trial and error of taking a shot, seeing whether the light is landed in the shot, getting quite a few shots where it won't be lit up at all, or there'll be a corner of the shot lit up, and having to adjust it. This definitely makes life easier, and that's why when I get people going, oh, I'm interested, thinking about a flash, a strobe for my camera setup, one of the first things I say is, well, what photography do you want to do, and how keen are you on snooting? If someone comes back and says, oh, I love snooting, I really want to be able to do that as with the strobe I'm going to get, then I tend to say, well, this would be the strobe I would suggest. The snoot comes with a couple of these aperture cards, I think they call them, which have 4 different sized holes in. This one is the circular one, so this is for primarily for lighting from above, but as long as your subject is parallel with perpendicular at right angles to the snoot when you're aiming it, you should get a circular opening. Now, as well as that, there is a set of oval ones or elliptical ones, whatever you want to call it. And this is quite a nifty idea that I haven't really used. I'm terrible for having things, not reading the manuals very well, and not utilizing all the features of equipment. But the idea behind this is these cards, they just slot in and they have little notches so they kind of click through. But the idea is, if you maybe the subject is at an angle and you can't get sort of the circular circular option to work and give you a circular area, if you put this one in and then turn the actual snoot on the strobe, apparently, I've not tested it, but I can understand the sort of logic of it. It will turn the sort of oval lighting, it will turn circular if it's if the area you're lighting is at an angle. So that's an interesting thing. I was kind of like, well, I can get an elliptical shape by just angling the strobe. Why do I need this? But this has a particular purpose. Whether you're going to, I'll be honest, changing between the two, I found having lots of bits and pieces sort of dangling off was a bit of a pain, so I tended to just have the circular one in place and move the strobe to get the circle. So again, if you have opinions about these sort of things, feel free to put something in comment. Have you used that feature? Did you know about that as a feature? The snoot is an optical snoot. It literally says it on the side. That just means that it's got a lens in it. I'm not sure. Yeah, you should be able to see. It has kind of a diffuser on the inside part, so there is like a translucent plastic piece in between, and then the front has this lens. Backscatter sort of say that it will give you because of having this optical property, it gives you a more powerful beam than you would get with a conventional snoot from the same sort of power of strobe. I've tried different ones. I've never sort of done an absolute back-to-back thing because it's hard to do if you've got different power strobes and things. It's not really easy to sort of judge, but it works. I tend to not necessarily worry too much about how it's made, how it works, but if it does the job, I'm not complaining. So on the strobe, you've got quite a lot of sort of setting options. Hopefully you can see that. You have a little silver button, you have a mode dial, and then you have the output dial. When you turn it on, the first sort of setting is manual, and you control the output of the strobe via this red dial. Nicely designed. The control dial clicks pretty well. It's got a good raised bit. It has a little white mark that tells you where it's pointing, and it's slightly different shape, so it goes to a finer point at the bit where it's pointing, so the one you've set it to. The output dial has got pretty heavy knurling or ridging, whatever you want to call it. Moves quite well, pretty easy to operate with gloves on. I've used it up in Scotland and it worked fine. Wearing I wear 3mm gloves, but I'm sure it'd be okay with 5mm. And then you have this silver button, which is for the video light. The video light has 4 output settings. I keep saying video light. It's to be honest, I've had video lights that had less power than this, so you probably could use it as a low powered macro video light. You could call it a focusing light, an aiming light. It can do all of those things. As I say, that turns it on and off. You can also make it do a flickery, flashy light to get people's attention by holding it down. Right round on the other side of the dial, I'll do this one first, is a test setting. So it will fire. Okay. You might have seen that. It was quite fast. It will fire a test shot so you can at least work out whether or not it's working. They've also suggested, and this is something that is like, oh, okay, that you could use that for light painting for slow shutter photography as well. You could use that test feature to fire around a slow shutter shot. So that's something interesting. I haven't tried it. I should. I never get time to do sort of more exciting experimental stuff with this. I tend to be like, oh, I'm testing something, what am I testing next? And I tend to do a lot of shooting with the sort of simplest of modes, the manual modes. You'll also see 2 SC modes. That's smart control. It's basically TTL. These TTL, they're only compatible with Olympus cameras RC mode. So the RC mode is where the camera flash sends a signal to designed to Olympus came up with it as a way of triggering off camera flashes without your camera having to flash for land photography. So most of the Olympus mirrorless cameras, and certainly the Olympus TG cameras now, have this option, and by making it specific, making the TTL mode, this smart control mode, specifically for that group of cameras, those models of cameras. I should also say OM systems, what used to be Olympus cameras, they still have these features. Because of that, it's pretty accurate. As TTL modes go, I've done a bit of a test with it. It works really well. I am not a fan of TTL. I use my strobes on manual pretty much all the time, but having not been impressed by a lot of TTL modes, this is probably the most accurate one I've seen. But it's only going to work with Olympus and OM system cameras. It's quite nice in the fact that it has two modes. One is sort of a standard distance one, so it's for fish portraits and things like that, and then when you're getting in closer, where sometimes TTL modes don't work even less well than normal, it has a macro one as well. So it has SC and SC with a macro symbol, a tulip symbol. And yeah, at least on the tabletop, they work pretty well. I've tried them with a TG6, and I've tried them with my old mirrorless Olympus EPL, and they give a quite accurate exposure. Where they fall down is when you've got a very dark subject. It does add more light than necessarily you need. So, and I would certainly recommend, if you're gonna use TTL with these, set the exposure metering on your camera to spot metering, so you can kind of get the most appropriate thing. It helpfully also has a beep that tells you when the strobe has hit maximum output when it's in one of those two modes. So if your strobe is kind of maxing out, and the subject is still not correctly exposed, it kind of means get closer. I found sometimes, certainly with very dark subjects, it was maxing out until I got the strobe quite close. Yeah, close. So yeah, just be aware of that's helpful. Again, I think that's a nice feature. You then have, interestingly, if you can see that, HSS, high speed shutter sync. So this is for use. You need a strobe trigger in your housing that will work with it, so an optical strobe trigger that can do high speed shutter sync and that will work with this strobe, but it will do high speed shutter sync, so where your flash can fire, your strobe can fire with the camera set on higher shutter speeds than the normal sync speed. So if you're a compact user, don't worry yourself about this. This is something that doesn't apply to compacts. But if you're a mirrorless or a DSLR user and you want to get shutter speeds above the sync speed, so above the point where normally you start to get shadows of the shutter curtain appearing in your pictures, you can do it with this. And that's helpful if you're wanting to do, use very large apertures, or you're wanting to shoot in very bright conditions or towards the sun and things like that, and you want to kind of shut out the ambient light, but light up your subject with the flash. It should do the job. Interestingly, if you're an Olympus user, you don't need to use this HSS setting. You can set it to the SC and use your camera in a particular RC mode, You have to set it to RC and then put it in, it's called something like FP. And I've tested it and it works. I was shooting up to 1/4000th of a second and it worked fine. I say tested it. I've not done this. I've not used it underwater. All these things are on my to-do list of like, oh, I need to go back and have a play with it. The infuriating thing with my camera is when I set the strobe, the camera to the RC mode, you then get this whole thing for controlling flashes, and that comes up in when you press the OK button instead of the what's called the super control menu, which is something if you're an Olympus user you'll be used to, where you press the OK button and you get all the things like to change the ISO and change the flash, and lots of different options appear in this menu. That doesn't come off. So if you need to change something that's normally in that menu, you have to take it off RC and then put it back on RC after you've changed it. It's a bit finicky. But yeah, so you have you have this high speed shut sync option, and yeah, if you're an Olympus user and you've got an Olympus flash on your mirrorless camera, you don't even need a strobe trigger to do it. So I'm pretty impressed with that as an added feature. Then we have this mode, REM. You can see that. And this is remote control. This is what this little widget is for. So this goes onto the cable connection instead of your cable. And there's a little rubber bit that the idea is you stretch it over the ball mount. Or I think you're probably best putting the ball mount through it before you screw the ball mount down, just to keep it in place. And then this is a kind of directional thing for using a strobe off camera. So the idea behind it is you set your off-camera strobe to this REM mode, you place it, and Backscatter do a special, they call it a muck stick, one of these like metal pointer sticks, but it's specially designed so it has a little sand anchor, it's called, to hold it in place, and a ball mount on the end, and you mount your strobe on the ball mount. It's sold as an extra accessory. It's something £45.60, I think, in the UK. Obviously, it only works on sand and things, so you're going to have to, if you're doing something on a different surface, you're going to have to look at a different sort of option. But there are ways and means of building sort of tripod mounts and things that you can put a ball mount on. It's relatively easy to do for putting things on hard surfaces. And then what you do, you need another one of these. So I have not tested this. I only have one of these. If anyone would like to lend me, if Backscatter are listening and would like to give me another mini flash, I wouldn't say no. Or if somebody wants to lend me one to test this out. But what you then do is you can control the output of your remote strobe using the one that's connected up to your camera, and it's a somewhat complicated process, but you can basically link it up. It sends a signal, and you can then sort of set the output without having to go to the strobe and change it on the strobe, and then you can trigger your strobe with the one that's connected up to your camera, and there's a couple of options. You can either use it to sort of add background lighting, but use your other one that's triggering it also is a light source, or they do a filter that cuts out presumably everything apart from infrared. I would think it runs on infrared. They call it an IR filter, but I think it is cutting out everything else. That's a separate piece again, and that's £39. But then you can put that filter on so you don't light anything up from the front, and you can use your background, your off-camera strobe to backlight. How much you're going to use that, I don't know. It depends how sort of creative you want to get. They also do a coloured filter set, which is like 2 different sets of filters and the mounts for it that can be used on the strobe. You can use them with or without the snoot in place. That's £120. You can also use it, I think, with their video light. They do a macro video light, and the snoot, the optical snoot, is the same one that will go on that video light as well. So it has, you can use it multiple uses. Other things, what have I not covered? The build wise, as I've said, it's made with aluminium. It feels pretty robust. Let me just take this off. The battery compartment, it uses 2 O-rings. Screw in. Oh, that was well done. It has 2 O-rings, and it's a screw in, which is pretty much, it's a pretty secure way of sealing a battery compartment. I think it's a good way of doing it. You just have to remember to screw it all the way up. Couple of other things. It comes with, there's lots of these sort of stringy ties, and there is, if you can see, there is sort of a passage going through the ball mount with the idea, I presume, to thread these strings through. I found it a real pain to actually do that, to the point, especially if you're then taking this off and putting other things on. So what I tend to do is just put the loop inside that and then put the clamp on to hold the strobe in place, and that means the string, the cord is held in place as well. That works perfectly well for me, and it's a lot easier than trying to squeeze. These were real pain. I did try and do it last time, a while ago, when I was using it in the Philippines, and it was like, oh, forget this, I'm gonna just clip it on, and put it through the thing. The same with the snoot. It has a sort of loop. It does have like a little clip. I find these really, that one's not bad actually. Sometimes they can be a bit fiddly to undo and clip things on. The aperture things have a separate loop, and I like I say, I've tended to just leave one in and not use the other one. That again, I put round the ball mount on the strobe, so that if it does come off, it doesn't float away. They do sort of say, well, you can take it on and off, and if you've got a pocket big enough, you can unclip it, stick it in a pocket. If you want to use the strobe on its own without the snoot, you can do that. What I've tended to do, how I've used the strobe, is I've tended to go in with the intention of using it snooted and having the snoot on it, and then maybe have a different strobe for if I'm wanting some normal lighting. So I tend to go in with like an INNOS 2000, which is one of the strobes that I use quite regularly, and then this on a separate arm setup. But I've also used it as a focusing light. One of the sort of selling points of this is that you kind of, you don't need if you're, say, doing stuff where you're not going to want to snoot, but you need a focusing light, you could use this as a focusing light and use your other strobes, if you've got other strobes, as your actual lighting, and it does the job for that. I've used it on its own as a strobe, and it was really great as a macro strobe. Up in Scotland, where I was last month, I was having some dives where it was like I was using a separate focusing light and a strobe. I'm finding that I was struggling to get the focusing light to shine into small areas and be able to get the strobe into a position where the camera is going to focus, because the focusing light's in the right spot, and the light from the strobe is going to go in the right place. So having this where the light is going from exactly the thing for close-up stuff was really good. Once you're getting a bit wider, often I'm not pointing the strobe directly at the subject, so it becomes less useful when you're using it, the strobe and the light in one go. But it's still pretty good, and if you've got the diffuser on, it's spreading the focusing light as well, so it's going to give you some light. If you're looking for just like, okay, I want a sort of one-stop package for doing macro stuff, it's a pretty good option. I think it does a good job. Reliability wise, I've had mine for a year. I've not had any issues with it. The predecessor, the original Mini Flash, there were some reliability issues. There were, I know of returns. I sold only a couple, but one of those got returned. What we did find with the original Mini Flash, was it was quite temperamental when it came to triggering it with the fiber optic cable. You needed to correct, you needed a multi-core reasonable quality cable, otherwise it didn't always trigger. With the Mini Flash 2, I've not noticed it being quite as finicky, but I would still suggest get a multi-core cable. They're not that expensive. You don't necessarily need the Backscatter brand one. I certainly have tried it with an in-on multi-core cable, and it worked fine. It seemed to trigger perfectly reliably. So I'd go for a multi-core cable, definitely. So I think in general it's a pretty good value strobe, particularly if you're looking to do snooting, because of that. The reduced cost of buying the strobe and the snoot together. Having that light included makes it that much better, and makes snooting so much easier. I think you're gonna struggle to get a sort of strobe with as many features for the price. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel. Please hit the like button. If you have any comments, feel free to comment. If you disagree with me, if you aren't keen on the idea of having a specific macro strobe, let me know. All transparency, this is my strobe. I bought this strobe. I also deal backscatter equipment in the UK, so I sell the equipment. But I also sell a lot of other strobes as well. So I'm not like an ambassador for Backscatter. I'm not tied into promoting their products over other products. So hopefully I'm being fully honest with you about this product. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll tune in again.